Welcome back to the Daily Poem here on the Close Reads Podcast Network. I'm David Kern. Today is Monday, April 13th, 2020. The poem that I'm going to read today is by Wendell Berry. It is from a collection that was originally published in the early 70s, I believe in 1971. It's called The Country of Marriage. It's a series of poems that was published in a number of different magazines and journals, but was dedicated to Mr. Berry's wife. Mr. Berry is, of course, an American poet who was born in 1934, in August of 1934. So in August of this year, he will be 86 years old. But the poem that I wanted to read to you is called An Anniversary, and it is the last poem in this book, The Country of Marriage. This is how it goes. What we have been becomes the country where we are. Spring goes, summer comes, and in the heat, as 1 year or 1,000 years before, the fields and woods prepare the burden of their seed out of time's wound, the old richness of the fall. Their deed is renewal. In the household of the woods, the past is always healing in the light, the high shiftings of the air. It stands upon its yield and thrives. Nothing is lost. What yields, though in despair, opens and rises in the night. Love binds us to this term with its yes that is crying in our marrow to confirm life that only lives by dying. Lovers live by the moon, whose dark and light are one, changing without rest. The root struts from the seed in the earth's dark, harvest and feast at the edge of sleep. Darkened, we carried out of need, deep in the country we have married. Berry has always been a poet of comfort for me. A poet to turn to when things seem dark, when anxieties set in, when the world seems too complicated, when I don't know what to do. There's a sort of, I don't want to entirely, suggest too much when I say this, but there's a sort of psalmic quality for me, like reading wisdom poets or something like that. And there are certainly the words themselves, but there's also the words that are in his poems themselves, that is. But there's also a sort of rhythm, a sort of song to his words, to his lines, to his stanzas, that for me are sort of healing mentally. When I'm feeling anxious, when I'm feeling worried, when the stress of that anxiety and that worry is bearing on my shoulders and in my mind, Berry for me is someone that I turn to. This is one of those poems that for some reason is helpful in that way for me. We, of course, are living in a time of high anxiety, at least for me, for many of us. I know for many of you. And when I brought the podcast back last Friday, I heard from people online who were saying, now more than ever, we need poetry. And I was thinking, you know what, that is so true. So I want to apologize that it's taken me so long to be able to build in this rhythm back into my life as things have shifted a little bit. But I'm going to bring you as many poems as I can over the next weeks, months, I guess years. But, this is a poem that has that particular Berry cadence, that particular rhythm. There's a sort of trust in Berry's work, in the workings of the world, that underneath everything, there is hope. That it is our job to be constant. That it is our job to have hope in the reality that the world has, that there is something rich going on at the core of the world. As with a marriage, it is our job to be steadfast, to maintain our own hope. And that's why this particular collection, I think, is particularly helpful for me. I don't know any other way to put it, but it's helpful for me. When I am feeling like I'm losing my grip, when I'm feeling like I'm losing my own ability to be steadfast, when I feel like I am becoming caught up in despair. There's another Berry poem, which many of you know, about being caught up in despair and going and sitting amongst the peace of wild things. Many of you know it. If not, Google the peace of wild things. I'll read this one more time for you. And hopefully this is a poem, and many of the poems that you'll hear on this podcast this week and over the next few weeks will have that same effect for you as some of these poems do for me. It's going to be where my head is over the next few weeks, particularly in this sort of Easter season. So once more, here is An Anniversary by Wendell Berry. What we have been becomes the country where we are. Spring goes, summer comes, and in the heat, as 1 year or 1,000 years before, the fields and woods prepare the burden of their seed out of time's wound, the old richness of the fall. Their deed is renewal. In the household of the woods, the past is always healing in the light, the high shiftings of the air. It stands upon its yield and thrives. Nothing is lost. What yields, though in despair, opens and rises in the night. Love binds us to this term with its yes that is crying in our marrow to confirm life that only lives by dying. Lovers live by the moon, whose dark and light are one, changing without rest. The root struts from the seed in the earth's dark, harvest and feast at the edge of sleep. Darkened, we are carried out of need, deep in the country we have married. This has been the Daily Poem. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll be back tomorrow with another poem for you.